Hello and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what we're looking at. Election Day is officially a week away. Our Spotlight Politics team on what you should know before casting your ballot. Mayor Johnson prepares to unveil his plan for addressing a massive budget gap. But the question on a lot of people's minds, will it include a property tax hike?
Here comes the Hail Mary with the game on the line, and the ball is caught!
There it is, man. Hail Mary, heartbreaker aside, a midseason look at where the Chicago Bears stand. And now to some of today's top stories. Election Day is a week away, and more than 260,000 Chicagoans have already cast their ballot. If you haven't yet, though, don't worry, you still have time. The deadline to request a vote-by-mail ballot in Chicago is this Thursday, day after tomorrow, at 5 p.m., and mail-in ballots will be accepted as long as they're postmarked by next Tuesday, which is, of course, Election Day. If you request a vote-by-mail ballot but change your mind and you want to vote in person, you must take your mail-in ballot with you to the polling place and surrender it. To find your polling place and to see if you are registered to vote, check out our WTTW News Voter Guide online. That's where you'll find more information on when and where to vote, as well as information on the candidates who are running. A utility watchdog says People's Gas customers will be facing decades of rate hikes if the company's pipe replacement program is allowed to continue.
The project has been behind schedule and over budget from the very beginning. It's sparked a heating affordability crisis in Chicago, unfortunately. Consistently, about 1 in 5 customers are more than 30 days behind on their gas bills. In July, in the middle of the summer, customers behind on their gas bills owed the utility a staggering $89 million.
People's Safety Modernization Program replaces thousands of miles of underground pipes that the company says are aging and deteriorating. But a new report from the Citizens Utility Board, or CUB, says completing the program would hike rates by nearly 7% a year for more than 800,000 customers. The report also says residents would incur residual costs of financing the project far past the deadline for completion. They're asking state regulators to hold the utility company accountable and implement safeguards. But People's Gas pushes back on some of CUB's claims. To learn more about that, please visit our website. Late October is feeling more like summer this week, with potentially record high temps predicted today and tomorrow. National Weather Service says the Chicago area reached 82 degrees today, passing the record set for this date in 1999 at 78 degrees. But the warm temps roll in with strong southwest winds, posing a danger of fire and a danger of your Halloween decorations blowing away in a gust. 45 to 55 mile-an-hour winds are predicted Wednesday night through Thursday afternoon, dying down just in time for trick-or-treating. And a little bit of rain overnight. Up next, our Spotlight Politics team on what we might expect from Mayor Johnson's budget address. That's right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Mayor Johnson's going to be in the hot seat at City Council tomorrow, outlining for Alder people how he plans to close the city's $1 billion budget gap. Meanwhile, we learned of another resignation at City Hall this week, and in the final stretch towards Tuesday's election, millions are being spent on the inaugural class of school board candidates. Here with all that and more is our Spotlight Politics team, Amanda Vinicky, Heather Sharon, and Nick Blumberg. Hello again, team. So let's look at what we're expecting will come out in the mayor's budget address. Tomorrow, we're hearing reports he'll propose a property tax hike. That is despite what we heard him promise on the campaign trail.
What my plan does is very simple. We eliminate the debt in my first term while also making up to $1 billion of investment without raising property taxes.
All right, Heather, what do you expect to hear tomorrow?
Well, I'm in a little bit of an awkward position because the mayor's office has already briefed reporters on what he's going to say tomorrow, but I've agreed not to report that until he starts speaking tomorrow. I will say what I've been saying all along. The city has a limited ability to raise new revenue, and the easiest and most effective way to do that is to raise property taxes, which is why Mayor Johnson finds himself between the proverbial rock and a hard place. The city is facing a projected budget gap of nearly $983 million next year. There is no simple way to raise that kind of money without raising property taxes, laying off city workers, and slashing city services. Now, we just went through weeks of chaos at CPS with Mayor Johnson refusing to sort of accept cuts to the city's public school system. I asked him if he wasn't going to accept cuts like that to the school system, would he accept cuts and layoffs to the city services? And he said he didn't want to. So there is really a limited amount that he can do.
And pain to go around. Amanda, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, and this comes as there are still additional pressures, right? So as Heather indicated, that chaos or whatever you want to call it at Chicago Public Schools, not yet done. I mean, a contract isn't finalized. We don't know yet what is going to happen with management there and their own fiscal solutions. And then you also have additional asks. I mean, there is pressure to put more into the public health system, to put more into housing. So that's all there. And I do think that you have sort of a recognition that this, even when he was a candidate, that the fiscal situation the city was in should not have been a surprise. So while you're going to have critics say, hey, wait, you're reversing a campaign pledge, that is going to be, to me, very fair. He knew that as a candidate, roughly what he was looking at and what he wanted to do, and that it was going to cost dollars to do so.
Nick, what kind of pushback do you think the mayor's going to get from city council on this?
Well, I think, as we often say in these spotlight segments, it depends. It depends on,
which council member you talk to.
Exactly. Well, and it depends on what the mayor lays out in his address tomorrow. If, certainly he and his allies have been setting the table for the potential of a property tax increase. Obviously, one of the few options that is available, but that's the kind of thing that gets you pushback from, business leaders, from alders who represent wards with higher valued properties. That's really going to hurt their constituents in the pocketbook. There's also a question of what might we see in terms of other taxes and fees. There have been lots of ideas floated around about Uber and Lyft taxes, about upping the bag on single-use plastic. Single-use plastic bags, about, the garbage collection fee. The Civic Federation had a big report with a lot of these ideas. But, some of those fees can be more regressive, can hit lower income folks. So then you're going to hear from members of Johnson's progressive base, from alders who represent wards with a higher population of low income Chicagoans. And again, the personnel questions here, are there going to be layoffs? Are there going to be furloughs? Those are things that need to be negotiated with Chicago's labor unions, who have the ear of the mayor and a lot of folks on the council. So it depends, but he really has the potential to be, taking fire from all sides.
Heather, of course, without breaking any embargo that you've agreed to, what parts of the budget are you going to scrutinize first when you see it tomorrow?
Well, I'll be looking at the Chicago Police Department's budget to see if the mayor is sort of cutting back on spending on public safety. I will also be looking to see how much he plans to promise to spend on enforcing the consent decree. The city has spent a significant amount of money in previous years. Whether that continues in this lean budget year, I think, is an open question. I'll also be looking to see whether the mayor can continue to build up the city's mental health services. That was really the center of his campaign, to that promise to invest in people. The city now has a limited ability to make those investments, and it's a zero-sum game. If he spends money there, it's not available to spend elsewhere.
All right, so looking past tomorrow, there's a little election next week. You might have heard about it.
Wasn't aware.
What election? Talking about. So let's start with the congressional races. One that looks like it'll be tight. 17th district, which includes Rockford, Peoria, Quad Cities, Bloomington, Normal. Amanda, Republicans are hoping that they can flip this district. Tell us about why it's important.
Yeah, so I mean, this is the second election after the borders were redrawn for congressional districts, and that's in part why you don't see more competitive races. Certainly in the Chicago suburbs, you have Republicans really making a go of it, but you can look at the national party's finances as an indicator of what races they believe to be winnable, and this is really the one where you have seen investments from the GOP. Though granted, not as much as was the case before Vice President Kamala Harris became the nominee. This is really where you have seen some backing off from federal financing of retired Judge Joe McGraw, who's running against first-term incumbent Eric Sorensen. He is a weather forecaster. Typically, like conventional wisdom says that it's after your first term that you're going to be the easiest to flip a seat. And so that's in part, and also because of just the demographics of this district. But again, Democrats going into it feeling pretty darn confident. And I do think this is a race that we're going to be watching because it is, again, the one of Illinois' congressional districts that is seen as somewhat competitive. And that, of course, could have huge ramifications nationally in this really close fight for control of the U.S. House.
All right, next week we're also going to be electing the Chicago School Board. We're part of it for the first time. Nick, millions of dollars being spent on these campaigns. Where's this money coming from?
There are a couple of very well-funded PACs and very active. If Amanda, I don't know about your your mailbox. I came home from being gone for a few days, and it was filled to the brim with mailers. There are a couple of Chicago Teachers Union affiliated PACs, as well as a couple affiliated with charter school supporters. CTU about $2 million and about 2.8 from the charter affiliates. Now these PACs are, not new necessarily, but these seats are, and there's been, some concern raised from supporters of the elected school board about just how much money is flowing in. What's interesting, in particular with the charter backers, is that a lot of the money is coming in from out of state. Since 2021, the year the elected school board bill was passed, the Illinois Network of Charter Schools PAC has gotten about $1.6 million in out-of-state contributions. We're seeing, an image of some of the CTU-backed candidates. There's also the Charter Network-backed candidates. But those out-of-staters, the Waltons of the Walmart family for many years. We've also seen pro-charter contributions from Reed Hastings, who co-founded Netflix. From the very wealthy in-town or in-state philanthropists, Craig Duchessois, Helen Zell, also from Joe Mansueto, billionaire businessman, owner of the Chicago Fire. So there's a lot of interest here, and it's also been interesting to see the tactics some of them use. Some of them are just, hey, vote for so-and-so. There have also been some saying, oh, this person's basically a Trumper, and they're saying, like, no, I'm a Democrat. I just might support charters, but I'm still a Dem. So it's been a really interesting race to watch.
Really pretty dirty, frankly, which is, I guess, not surprising. There are certainly a lot of high stakes. I think it is worth remembering that no matter what, the mayor is going to have a majority of the board. However, these turn out because he's going to be able to appoint the 10 non-elected members plus a citywide school board president. So there will be 10 people elected from these districts, and there are a lot of resources like our voter guide where you can check out their positions, because there are, by the way, other candidates who are not supported by the CTU or by these more pro-charter organizations, and they're trying to make a go of it as well. So it's, I think, confusing for a lot of voters because there are just so many candidates, and to be honest, it's not clear. Like you said, my mailbox is overflowing with mail, and you might understand because legally they have to say who is paying for it. It's not necessarily going to say something like paid by the Chicago Teachers Union or ICNS. I mean, it's not going to necessarily say something like that. It could be an affiliated PAC. So you really want to do your research.
Yeah, it's also interesting to see like this much money flowing into a school board election, because that in the past has been a criticism and a reason that, critics have said, like, let's stay away from this because now we're infusing all of this money into schools, which are already complicated.
Local school council elections, these are not.
No, far from it, in fact. Okay, something else that's going to be on the ballot next Tuesday, Amanda, property tax referendum. And sometimes these can be deceptively worded. Is this one pretty easy for voters to understand?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. And really what you need to know, though, is that it's advisory. There are actually going to be 3 questions on every
advisory,
voter's
meaning non-binding.
ballot, meaning non-binding. This is really just a way to take the temperature or the pulse of the people. And so this asks whether there will be a 3% surcharge, is what it is called, on any income over $1 million. Illinois has kind of tried this before. Actually, former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan had on the ballot an advisory question of should there be a millionaire's tax. that's something that I think sounds really good to a lot of people, but it comes as you have the Chicago Teachers Union calling on the state to try again potentially at going for a graduated income tax. This was a binding constitutional amendment question in 2020 that voters rejected. I believe it was 53% of voters said no to that. Is this another opening window, or is this really just a Democratic tactic? They were the ones, the Democrats in the state legislature, that put these 3 advisory questions on the ballot. Some would say it was an attempt to crowd it out so that other questions couldn't get on there, and sometimes it's also a way to just get the people excited, maybe get some additional
their argument in case they want to push it again later.
Sure.
Hey, look, in this non-binding referendum, X% of Illinoisans said that this is the thing they wanted.
You got it, Brandon.
I can spotlight too, everybody. So Heather, another leadership change at City Hall this week. Tell us about Tracy Scott.
Yeah, well, she was the head of the Chicago Housing Authority for 4.5 years. Her last day is Friday, and she was really tapped by Lori Lightfoot just before the pandemic swept Chicago to sort of revitalize the city's public housing system. That never really happened, and our friends over at Block Club Chicago have done a lot of work looking at the number of units that have been vacant and have fallen in disrepair at a time when the mayor has made expanding the stock of affordable housing a real priority. It seemed to me that maybe perhaps their visions were not quite aligned, and now she is on her way out. Now, the mayor controls the Chicago Housing Authority, much like he used to control the Chicago Public Schools. He appoints the CEO, he appoints the board members who then must be confirmed by the city council. What's interesting is that there are a number of board members for the CHA that were first appointed by Rahm Emanuel, still there. So that is an agency that I think has flown under the radar, but is going to have a lot of attention on it coming up.
Ready for some changes. That is actually Spotlight, though, because we've got an election next week, so we'll have a lot to talk about then. Looking forward to it. That's Spotlight gang, Amanda Vinicky, Heather Sharon, Nick Blumberg. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
And be sure to check out our WTTW News Voter Guide. It is a one-stop shop for everything you need to know before voting. You'll find candidate profiles and questionnaires, as well as key dates to know and how to find out again if you're registered to vote. That's very important if you want to vote. That is all at WTTW.com/voterguide. Up next, a mid-season look at where the Chicago Bears stand. Stay with us. The Chicago Bears snatched defeat from the jaws of victory on Sunday in Washington, D.C. The deflating last-second loss to the Commanders came after a string of 3 consecutive wins had Bears fans dreaming of a postseason appearance. Now, instead of the playoffs, the talk is of a heartbreaking and improbable loss that some Bears players are calling the worst they've ever experienced. Joining us now to help us digest what we've seen so far this season, we're delighted to welcome back former offensive lineman for the Chicago Bears, James Big Cat Williams. I gasped out loud at that nail-biting loss to the Commanders. What did you make of that Hail Mary play with just 2 seconds on the clock that gave the Commanders that victory?
I did something out loud too, but it wasn't
Not a gasp, was it?
It wasn't a gasp. It was hard to watch. You know, they had played so poorly in the first half, got themselves back into the game, took a lead, 21 seconds left, you think the game was over, and then you just started to watch a series of events unfold that just didn't look like it was going to go in their favor. And unfortunately, it didn't. You know, you have a player out there with his back turned to the offense when the play starts. You know, you have players telling other players where they should be positioned at points in time during those last 2 or 3 plays, and it wasn't a good look for a team that prides itself now on the character in the locker room. That's just not very good character.
Yeah, to say the least. A lot of anger, especially being directed, you mentioned, towards Tyreek Stevenson. Is the criticism fair, over the top?
I think from inside the locker room, anyone in that locker room can criticize him any way they want. They know how he practices every day. They know what kind of person he is. From the outside looking in, you know, I don't know. I'm not around him every day. I don't know if he's a guy that would make mistakes like that on a regular basis or if it was just a one-time thing. So, you know, to hear all the people wanting to cut him and do all these different things, you know, you always hear that players that are very good or very important to the team get a little longer rope than others, and it's the truth.
Bears fans, though, might say, you know, once is enough. He has apologized via social media as well as in person to the team on Monday, saying he won't let, you know, such a lapse in concentration happen again. Should that be enough, you know, to sort of like, you know, all right, let's put this in the past, let's move on, let's do better next week? Or should he face a disciplinary consequence?
I played in the 90s. You know, I kind of feel like we would have handled it in-house. You know, you think about all the things that are going on now as far as Komet and all these other players coming out and speaking about the things going on in the locker room, and I think those are, you know, like I said, I'm old school, so I think those are things that are kept in the locker room. We deal with those things in the locker room. Even though I'm media now, we don't take it to the media. We deal with these things ourselves.
Okay. So almost at the halfway mark of the season, how would you assess what you've seen from the Bears offense so far?
Well, I think you've seen a Bears offense that has grown a little bit, but unfortunately it hasn't grown against superior defenses. When you've seen them go up against the good defenses, they've struggled. When you've seen them go up against defenses that are a little below average, they've played well. They've looked good. Caleb's looked good. You know, as a unit, they have looked good. But, you know, you're starting to get into the meat of your season now. Starting November 17th, you know, you're in the conference play. You play the Packers. They have a good defense. So you've got to have some things figured out by then, and you would have thought that during the bye week was a good opportunity to figure some of those things out. Now, you have injuries, and that's something you have to deal with. So they have a long way to go in a short period of time.
How about the defense?
Defense isn't looking bad. You know, you look at they're playing that old school cover two, bend but don't break, giving up field goals, not giving up touchdowns. Even with the Hail Mary, they only gave up 17 points. And you would think that with all the offensive firepower that you have, that 17 points given up by your defense is still enough for you to win.
Caleb Williams, you know, he's a rookie, but obviously, you know, still shouldering huge, you know, expectations from fans. What's realistic to expect from, you know, a rookie in his first season?
Well, you expect him to grow. You expect to see progression as you move on. You don't want to see 2 steps forward and then a step back. And I think that's kind of what we got out of the Washington game, was a step back. So, you know, what do they have to clean up? Only the people in that locker room know. Because is it people concentrating? Is it people not knowing exactly what they're supposed to do? Or is it that you have people in some positions that don't have the ability to do the things that you're asking of them?
How do you think the rest of the division is shaping up?
It's a rough division. I mean, you look at Detroit, and right now they're rolling. Minnesota has come out and looked a lot better than I think people thought they would. Green Bay's playing well right now, and you know, unfortunately, with a loss, Bears are down at the bottom of the list and have to fight their way back up.
Expectations for the rest of the season?
Caleb is getting better, and you see flashes of how good he is. You look at situations that he's been in at the end of halves and at the end of games when he's been able to put the team, the offense on his shoulders, move them down the field. Now, don't get me wrong, it takes all 11, but you've seen those things that everyone talked about him coming out of college. His ability to throw the off-platform throws, his ability to run a little bit, his ability to get out of the pocket and still keep his eyes downfield. So these are things that I think they can grow on, and as he grows, the offense should expand, the offense should grow and look better.
All right, so next up, Bears are at the Arizona Cardinals. 30 seconds, 20 seconds left. How do you think they match up?
It's gonna, well, My first concern is that carryover from the Washington game. Does that Hail Mary, does the tension in the locker room carry over into Arizona? And if that happens, I don't know if they have a chance to beat Arizona. But if they can get back on the right track and play their brand of football, then they stand a chance.
All right, keep that tension in the locker room,
Yeah.
not on the field. James Big Cat Williams, thanks so much.
Thank you.
And we're back to wrap things up right after this. And that is our show for this Tuesday night. Join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. Mayor Johnson unveils his plan for addressing a nearly $1 billion budget deficit. And as former President Obama stumps for Vice President Harris, a look at the impact black men could have in next week's election. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm committed to giving back to the community through law and philanthropy.